Hello everybody, thank you for joining me for another Alfred Hitchcock Presents review. Today we'll be talking about Season 4, Episode 32, Human Interest Story, starring Steve McQueen and Arthur Hill. And I gotta say, I wasn't really the biggest fan of Human Interest Story. It's not like a terrible episode Alfred Hitchcock Presents, but I didn't think it was particularly good either. So this episode starts with Hitchcock looking at various electronic devices, and some of them look very different than electronic devices we have now. So that's the setup for our story. So our main story starts with a reporter named Bill, and he gets a tip from his boss that there's a man in a bar who claims he is a Martian. And since he's a reporter, he goes to find out about this story, although he seems very skeptical. So Bill goes to this bar. He talks to the bartender. They seem to know each other and seem to be working together. The bartender gives him some general information on the situation. So Bill introduces himself to this person who says that they are a Martian, but he says that his problem is he's in another person's body, this person named Howard. I'm just going to call this Martian Howard for the rest of this review to keep things simple. So he says the reason he knows that he's this person Howard is because he retains all this person's memories somehow. So they keep talking, and we get a lot of backstory. We get to hear this Martian named Howard's full story. And I got to say, this is where the episode starts to lose me quite a bit. This story is very long. There's no visual aids or anything, which makes sense when you find out the twist at the end. But it's just a very long, involved story that goes on for a long time, and I didn't think it was all that interesting. But I will cover some of what I consider to be the important highlights. So first, he describes his physical appearance. He says he used to be like 8 feet tall when he was in his original body. He also says that he woke up alone in a cell and no one was around to feed him or anything. So eventually he escaped. He dug his way out. But when he was walking around on Mars, which I think is where he's supposed to come from, he says he found a ton of the population had died off. He said there had been this disease that had been killing off Martians, but they died some other way. This is never really expanded upon too much, but I don't think it's that important. Basically, the story gets more elaborate as it goes. It gets kind of more unbelievable as it goes, and it seems like this guy's probably crazy at this point, which I'll talk more about when I get to the twist near the end of the episode. So eventually, finally, it does seem like it takes a long time. I know Hitchcock episodes are generally talky, but this guy really talks a lot. So eventually we get back to the present situation, and this Martian in Howard's body doesn't know what to do. So Bill tells him, why don't you really pretend you're this guy Howard? Let's go home. I guess this Howard was married. Let's talk to your wife and you can just pretend that you're him. So they do go to visit the wife, and things seem to be going okay, except that Howard tells Bill, I'm going to tell this lady a truth. I'm not really her husband. And Bill says this is a bad idea. She might have you committed if you tell this story. She'll think you're insane. So Bill says he wants to show Howard something. So the two men go out. We get a brief scene with them, and then it looks like they're approaching a bar, and the scene just cuts away. And some very poor editing, I have to say, especially for this show, which is usually edited really well for an early TV show. We go back to Bill and his boss, and we get an explanation on everything that happened. Bill explains to his boss that Howard was crazy. He was from an institution. He really was a Martian, and he somehow escaped and found his way to their location. But it turns out that Bill had to kill this Martian, pretending to be Howard, because they are actually Martians and they want to take over. And this Martian, thinking he was Howard, might have ruined it for all of them. Now, this twist comes completely out of nowhere, especially since at the beginning of the episode, our reporter friend Bill and his boss were talking very normal, just like they were humans. Why would they have done this if nobody was around? I guess it's just to fool the audience, but it doesn't totally make sense in context. And although this twist is kind of interesting, there's no real build to it, and I didn't find it particularly satisfying for all the exposition we had to go through in this story, which I thought was way too long. Overall, this episode had some good ideas. It is pretty well acted by the two leads, Steve McQueen and Arthur Hill, but I just didn't find this episode ultimately satisfying. I thought some of the scenes were too long, too talky, too overcomplicated, which is unusual. Usually things are undercomplicated, but I thought this was overcomplicated and the payoff was only so. So I'm going to give Human Interest Story a 2 out of 5. I would say you don't really need to watch this episode unless you're a huge Steve McQueen fan or you're watching every single episode of the show. So a 2 out of 5 for Human Interest Story, and thanks for watching.